Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something you probably use every day, but maybe don't think about too much: the invisible shield that protects the drinking water right here in Ontario. So, let's dive in.
I mean, think about it. It's something most of us just do without a second thought. You turn on the tap, you fill a glass, and you drink. It's such a simple act, but it's built on this massive, massive foundation of trust.
So what is it? What exactly is standing guard between our water sources and all the things that could potentially contaminate them? Well, that's the big question we're going to answer right now.
So, let's start right there, with that simple glass of water. It might be the end of the journey for the water, but the story of how it gets to us safely, well, that's where things get really interesting.
You see, behind that glass is a powerful protective shield. Now, this isn't some shield made of metal or anything like that. It's a complex, multi-layered system of laws and regulations, and they're all designed with one goal: to stop pollution long before it ever has a chance to reach your tap.
But here's the thing. This shield wasn't just built overnight. It was actually forged in the aftermath of a crisis, a moment that was a painful reminder of just how vulnerable our water could be.
Back in 2000, the town of Walkerton had a devastating contamination of its water supply. The public inquiry that followed was a huge turning point. And you can see a direct line from that tragedy right to the creation of the Clean Water Act just 6 years later.
The key takeaway from the inquiry was crystal clear. Instead of just focusing on treating water after it's already been contaminated, the best approach, the only real approach, is to prevent contamination from happening in the first place. You have to protect it right at the source: the lakes, the rivers, and the groundwater we all rely on.
And that idea, as simple as it sounds, is incredibly powerful. Protecting water at the source became the absolute foundation for the Clean Water Act, which is essentially Ontario's modern shield.
So, how does it all work? Well, you can think of it in 3 layers. First, you've got the Act itself. That's the big foundational law. Then that law requires local communities to create their own source protection plans. These are like local blueprints for mapping out all the potential risks. And finally, you get the specific regulations, the detailed, on-the-ground rules that make it all happen.
A huge part of those local plans is identifying what the law calls vulnerable areas. Basically, these are the critical zones, the land right around a well or a water intake pipe, where a spill or contamination could have an immediate and really dangerous impact on the drinking water.
Now, there are a bunch of these specific rules, but to really get how this works, we're going to zoom in on just one of them that deals with these vulnerable areas. This is where the shield gets really specific and has real teeth.
Which brings us to the sharp end of the law, the stuff you are just plain not allowed to do in these protected zones.
So the regulation outright bans activities that are a clear and present danger. For instance, disposing of untreated sewage, well, you can imagine, that could introduce dangerous pathogens right into the environment. Or handling large amounts of fuel. A chemical spill would be a toxic mess that's incredibly hard to clean up. The same logic applies to things like certain pesticides or spreading waste. The risk of harmful chemicals seeping into our groundwater is just too high to mess with.
And that's the key legal phrase right there: significant drinking water threat. The law doesn't leave any room for guessing when it comes to these high-risk activities. They are flat out prohibited because they have the potential to cause really serious harm.
Okay, so let's tie all of this back to where we started, that simple glass of water.
The next time you find yourself at the kitchen sink, about to get a drink, just pause for a second.
And remember that there's this whole multi-layered system, this shield born from a hard lesson that's actively working 24/7 to protect that water before it ever gets to your home.
This quote really nails the whole philosophy. It's not about just cleaning up messes, it's about preventing them in the first place. It's proactive, it's preventative, and it's the single most effective way to make sure the water we all depend on stays safe. So, the regulations give us the framework, right? The legal shield. But that kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. If we know how important that first line of defense is, what's our role in helping to protect the sources of our own water? Something to chew on. Thanks for watching.